the keystone species. I think this is something I have to bring out because, I always tell people, okay, a lot of people who tell me, are you jobless? Like, why are you spending so much time? There's so many athletes. And I'm like, it's a calling. But after a point now, I don't feel the need to justify. But for people like them, I also say that if not for the elephants, for our own self, we need them. Because forests thrive because of elephants, right? They reduce carbon imprint. So many species depend on them. So, and look at what's happening with our own system, with the floods, with the extreme climate. If the elephants go, the forests go. Remember COVID? Remember COVID biobubble? What happened to us, right? We were inside our own houses, but it was so difficult. And I was part of the bio bubble that time. I was part of RCB bio bubble. And they quadrant off an area. So people are like, oh my God, how is it to be? And I said, they're testing you every third day. You're in an unknown country and, everyone's just going, what's going to happen? Right? It doesn't matter if you're with, the who's who. And that time I remember, messaging one of my colleagues going, I really to an extent understand what happens to captive elephants because we were in a golden jail during COVID, right? My intention is that, we can all come together to be part of the movement, right? And in our own way, how is it that we can touch not just, nature and elephants, but, how can we bring about that inner shift in us, which actually transpires and touches everything? So that's the aim. And I would like to request Rakesh to begin with the first video, please. And something that I'd like you all to pay curious attention to through the talk and, through today is just what's coming up in your space, right? Being a psychologist, that's something we're very in tune with. No value judgment, no right or wrong. Just be mindfully and playfully curious as to what comes up in my space, because that's also, we're tapping into the elephant space and your own side, right? Now, I want you to just ponder for a second, how did this very brief video and the imagery in it, how did it make you feel, right? I want you to think of your first memory of an elephant. What was your first memory of an elephant? Okay, so can you see the connection here, right? So the video that you saw, right, was, the inspiration for the title of the book. And this is taken by Praveen Shanmugananda. It's a drone imagery from the Nilgiris. What he says is that, there are very few, he titles it as paradise. Okay, so for paradise. And he says there are very few spaces where the elephants can actually sleep freely, right? Can actually be themselves. And when I was towards the end of the book was when, of course, I'd seen this video and the title also came dancing. I will also tell you how it came up, how the title also came in my dreams ages ago. But as you see this, right, there's a young calf, if you notice, it's practically seems like a few days old, right? And this is the positive. I wanted to start off with something positive. And I think, the video that you have played is really about our heritage. And how many of us know that, the elephant is our heritage species, right? But how are we treating them? And, I wanted to hold this first because now I'd like you all to think about what is the association that you had and what is it that you keep hearing in the media as well, right? What are the stories that you keep hearing, right? We're all inspired by stories, right? I'm going to start with my own journey and how the elephants came into my life, because then it would also tie up into how each of us actually are part of the ecosystem. As Trishant was saying, I'm primarily, I was called, and I'm a sports psychologist and a depth psychologist, which actually aided, in helping captive elephant rehabilitation. And that's how this space came about, how our lives got intertwined. So, my journey started, I have my roots in Malad, right? Western Ghats, and which is a haven, or at least used to be a haven of nature. I was very influenced by my grandparents. And for those of us, I don't know how many are from Karnataka here, but I'm sure in every language, there is a song describing the elephant, right? And for me, right, I used to hear this song called Ane Bantu Ane, which literally means here comes the elephant, right? And then it goes on to describe the magnificence of these majestic beings. Anyone who's seen them, I see them every weekend, in a way blessed that, I am involved, but in a way, I wish, they were in a freer space, they were in the forest. But every time you see them, you're like, oh my God, that's that awe, that's that fascination, right? And this is how I was introduced to the song. And I think it built in my fascination, in my reverie. And when I saw them, it was another experience. So my journey started there. And then, long story short, I can go on about my journey, but then they came visiting in my dreams. And that's how I first got involved with them. Right now, why am I touching on this? Is because we need, to inspire and groom our younger generation, because they're the future conservationists, right? So that was how it started. And this is a quote from my book. And I'm sure each one of us, right? Just look at this elephant, this whom I call the little one. We'll hear about her, after some time. Just look at the eyes and think back about, an animal. I hate using the word pets because I think that comes from a very anthropomorphic view. It's like your animal companion, right? They speak so much through their eyes, right? I want you to hold this, because what is your animal saying? What is nature saying? And when we can pick on that, when we can tune into the field, that's the interconnected field, or what we call the anima mundi. And I've been involved with them for around 6, 7 years now, more than that. And, I always say I'm involved with elephants because I don't know who works on who, because I feel like I'm so much more evolving because they are so evolved. So this is what I wanted to start with. So this quote is such a beautiful quote, where the elephant walks, the earth remembers, right? And I know there was the Wild Whispers talk, which I also attended, where the ecology, the wildlife, and all those aspects were beautifully explained. I'm really trying to bring in the current status, and that's also what my book does, because I remember reading in one of the myths that when a story comes to you, right, it becomes your duty to put it forward, right? And when I got into the elephant space, I was also in love, in awe, in everything. But I started realizing that even those of us who love elephants, we don't know what's happening. And I'm just going to very briefly touch on, that aspect that, there are less than 30,000. The last census says it's just around 27,000 Asian elephants. It's in the IUCN Red List, right, as an endangered species. Unfortunately, around 3,000, some sources say more than 3,000, are in captivity for our entertainment, in the name of culture, for our passing pleasure. This is where your elephant rides, aiding comes, all these things come. They are the keystone species. I think this is something I have to bring out, because, I always tell people, a lot of people who tell me, are you jobless? Like, why are you spending so much time? There's so many athletes. And I'm like, it's a calling. But after a point now, I don't feel the need to justify. But for people like them, I also say that if not for the elephants, for our own self, we need them, because forests thrive because of elephants, right? They reduce carbon imprint. So many species depend on them. So, and look at what's happening with our own system, with the floods, with the extreme climate. If the elephants go, the forests go, and so do we, right? So, and what are some of the main causes is, shrinking habitat, which we'll be talking again and again. We come back to fragmented corridors in the name of growth, human elephant conflict, expansion of, for our so-called need, or I think that's something I'm going to let you all go about. So these are some of the things, and this is the reason I felt that I have to go beyond being in awe, beyond being in service to, okay, the few elephants that I'm in contact with, and I have to bring out the message. So that's really the intention of the book. And like our group, I think a few of them are here from Ani, is really to go, it's about the elephants. It's not about a Chaitanya. It's not just about a book, right? So can we hold that intention, right? And there is a very clear link between conservation and welfare. So I'm just going to explain this for a minute. So the free elephants or the wild elephants, what we call, will hopefully stay free, considering the way our forests are coming down. They, what is called the free or the wild, due to shrinking habitat or conflict, the elephants which get captured come under captive, right? And even in captive, you have the captured, and then you have elephants like which are in institution for rights, etc. Serve human purpose, right? They are what we call pure captive elephants, right? So to just hold this distinction when you read something, and of course, then we all know the African, that beautiful image there of the mother and the calf is from a South African friend of mine who uses art for conservation. So, I also want to keep bringing out these things because each one of us can play a role. And this is what I want us to remember. Yeah. So now let's look at what do we mean by captivity and captivity. But this is the current state of so-called wards in chains. And I'm going to talk about one or two of the case studies. One of an elephant that I unchained, and the other is a little Bani, whom I think all of you must have heard. Before that, I just want to read on the legend of Palakapya. I wonder how many of you all have heard of Palakapya Muni. He's, rightly called the first conservationist of India, right? Credited with the Hastayurveda. And I'm just going to read a small passage, right, which sets the context of what is currently happening in our country with the elephants. Yeah. Palakapya, in dialogue with the mythical king Romapada, formerly elephants could wander wherever they pleased and assume any shape. They roamed as they liked in the sky and on earth. Forest elephants that dwelled there happily, and by the power of fate, have been brought to towns in bonds, afflicted by sufferings of mind and body, are unable for long to sustain life, when from their own kind they have come into the control of men. Warriors only fight, horses only draw chariots, but elephants that are fit for a king both fight and draw. Thus, O king, having reached 120 years and having performed many kinds of work, the elephant goes to heaven. The source is Matangila, and King Romapada questions Palakapya. So, what can we do now? Which I think is a very pertinent question. And this is very beautifully explained in Edgerton, who's a linguistic scholar, his question, where he says that when the kingdom of Anga, ruled by Romapada, continued to prosper, it grew, and as it grew, the forests were cut down to make way for more livestock and agriculture. It was during this period that elephants began to come into contact with human beings. The interactions became more pronounced during droughts, especially when bamboo would sprout. Unfortunately, citizen concerns led to the capture of elephants. But thankfully, in the legend, Palakapya manages to convince Romapada that when the elephant sheds tears, a curse will befall us. So he requests Romapada to untie and release the elephants so he can take them away to a faraway land where they will not disturb his kingdom. And the wise king heeds his advice. As the last elephant was unchained, heaven drops started pouring, and rain appeared like a blessing. I cannot help but wonder if these raindrops were also tears of joy shed by the elephants in the heavens, witnessing their brethren finally freed from chains. How are you all feeling with this? I know the captive elephant scenario and actually the wild elephant scenario comes with a lot of distress. But as the famous conservationist Jane Goodall says, right, we hold on to hope and what is it that we can do. And look at this. This is, a legend ages ago, but it's exactly what's happening, right? As you all are sitting in your place, I want you all to just do this exercise. Okay. So you all can see me, right? So where you're sitting in your chair, right, is your just sit in a comfortable position, right? Sit straight. Yeah. And then now just expand your leg a little and maybe your arms a little, right? And now can you actually put your hands out, right? And stretch it as much as you can. If you were standing with someone, right, you would, or even someone sitting next to you, it would touch them. And now I want you to imagine a scene in the air, in the flight, where our seats are really quite small. And I want you to just squeeze in. See if, like, your seat is half, right? You can just come into that and then come back into your natural position. What do you think I was trying to do, right? Just the memory of, the flight. I remember, like, when someone doesn't even bother and they kind of pushing you, what happens to us? It's so irritating. It's annoying. So this is our need. This is our want. This is our greed. Okay. And this is what is happening, unfortunately, with the elephants, right? Imagine you're traveling. Okay. There is a jam. There is, some block. What are you going to do? You're going to maneuver around. You're not going to stand there forever, correct? So why do we expect that the elephants with their ancient memory are going to give up their space? And this is where we see so many deaths on railway tracks. Thankfully, now they're using AI, right? In the name of electrocution, the pineapple bomb, which happened a few years back in Kerala. And recently, the Rath Yatra, the Yatra in Ahmedabad, not the Puri one, where they brought elephants from Rajasthan, right? Not prepared for the kind of sound, music, noise. See, that's noise to them, right? And what happened? One young elephant, right? He panicked, lost control. Apparently, few got hurt. So, and this is our heritage species. These are our gods. The Ganesha avatar, how do we treat them? And I'm going to bring out these stories now, these two in particular. So, of course, the AI version is really what even our group Ani does is to spread awareness of what is an elephant really, right? This calf is really cute, right? You will see a lot of videos saying, oh, you know what, elephant calves think humans are cute. Which calf came and told you that, firstly? That is not the nature of elephants. Secondly, it's an infant. It's a calf, just as any other infant, including a human. It's going to go get, curious even about fire, about, an animal, right? So to start questioning what really is an elephant and what we saw in the video, people keep sending me, oh, look at this dancing elephant. No, the elephant is not dancing. Unfortunately, that head bobbing and stereotypical behavior is a sheer sign of stress. Remember COVID? Remember COVID bio bubble? What happened to us, right? We were inside our own houses, but it was so difficult. And I was part of the bio bubble that time. I was part of RCB bio bubble. And they quadrant off an area. So people are like, oh my God, how is it to be? And I said, they're testing you every third day. You're in an unknown country and, everyone's just going, what's going to happen? Right? It doesn't matter if you're with, the who's who. And that time I remember, messaging one of my colleagues going, I really, to an extent, understand what happens to captive elephants because we were in a golden jail during COVID, right? How difficult it was. And then when we say we put elephants in, institutions, in places which a shed, and an industrial shed, we tie them up front and back. We make them parade. We make them, do this repetitive action which has no meaning. Is that really natural? And also, why do we need to do this, right? The question, I've asked in the book is, are we so disconnected? And I think, I remember this discussion was happening even during the Wild Whispers talk as to that connection to nature, which seems to be disconnected, is also showing in many areas of life, right? I think it's a talk for another time, but if you start looking at your dreams, remember your dreams during COVID, right? During floods, it will also show your inner psychic state. Or when you're in a transition period, if you notice it, there actually is a lot happening in your psyche, right? So I want to, this elephant in the center, does anyone recognize this elephant? I can give a hint. It's called baby Bani or little Bani, whatever you want to call. This elephant, unfortunately, the calf was hit, on a railway track and severely injured, especially hip and back. Thankfully, the forest department immediately did some little bit of, first aid and brought it to Wildlife SOS. And I think anyone who loves an elephant and who knew this, we had, I think we were all holding our breath for weeks and months together, because if the elephant doesn't stand, then you have to put it down. Like an elephant has to stand, right? Because it cannot take the weight. So that is where this is. And I think the reason I also wanted to bring out this elephant in particular is, this is what happens when we go in the name of growth. We've expanded to the point that the elephants are going to walk in its natural memory. Their memory comes down from ancient times, from the herd. It's, and that is how this elephant got hit, right? Like now they're trying to do underground passes and, things. But to question how much are we going to keep cutting down? A colleague of mine was recently telling me that Bangalore's forest cover has gone to 1%. From 29 in around, 20 years, it's come to 1%, right? But also look at the irony. When there is a holiday, where do we all go? Where do we want to go? Everyone's running to the forest. I remember, the forest department, in fact, the forest minister actually had to he curtailed that there's only so many groups which can go because it affects the biodiversity. Are we mindful of our choices? And if nature is so important, my question is, what are the mini steps we take, right? For me, when I first came in touch with the elephants, and which is the one next to, Bani is of course, it's a little morphed so that the identity of the elephant is doesn't come out. But this looks like an elephant, right? It's an elephant, right? Everyone agrees? Yeah. She didn't know she was an elephant, right? The first time I met her, I said, "Oh, is your name Leela?" So that chapter, there's one entire chapter on that. And she rumbled back, right? And then all she wanted was to talk to me, to engage with me. Now, this is an elephant in the prime of her youth, right? She was 21 when I met her. And she was in an industrial shed. I was like, "Are you serious? There's an elephant." When I went to meet her, tied front and back with a dog, the Mahut's family, Mahut's are the elephant keepers, and chickens, right? And the entire time she wanted to speak to me. There's no magic in what I did. It's because I have been working and I was genuinely interested in her. So she was finally rescued after 2 years and brought to the sanctuary that I visit, but she's scared of elephants, right? Her vocalization is a lot more than other elephants because we suspect that she is being captured before she was 2 years. Where does our socialization skill comes from? It comes from our family. It comes from your circle, right? The ecosystem. When you take away an elephant and all it's seen is being in the shed and occasionally taken to blessing. So now do you understand the link? And this continues till date, right? And finally, she's beginning to understand. But I became her safe haven and then the people are. But the sad truth, and I think she's one of the reasons the book really inspired. It's like the elephants in particular that I meet. Like, as I said, I came into the captive welfare space first, right? So that a lot more Leelas don't appear, right? So now, what is the connection? Are we understanding the captive, free connection? It's our need or our passing whim, right? Which kind of keeps the industry going. So the young ones are illegally captured. I see a question here on what are the laws. That yes, there are laws, but there's a way people find, because also we want to sit, we want to bathe, we want to touch, we want to take photos. My question becomes, what does the elephant want? I read this very beautiful blog about it was one of the procession elephants, and a young child, right, starts crying. So the parent is trying to say, "Oh, don't worry, the elephant is not going to do anything." And then she says, "No, it looks so sad." And that was why I started with that first quote. If you look into the eyes, you will actually see what is and how it's feeling, right? And I want to give this example of, I was sitting in one of the institutions where I normally try to connect first to the Mahout. And yeah, they don't want to be, thanks to Shant. You can never, ever tame. Actually, an elephant is wild and it will always be wild. And that is why what you also saw in the video, they keep prodding. because that's a bull book, right? So why is the elephant listening? And see, this is also not to blame the mahouts, okay? Because the point is they are the front, they're the frontline warriors. But the point is, why do we need them? Like, I met the chief wildlife warden, and to give him the book, and he was saying, this looks wonderful. And, it's not the elephants who are the problem, it's the humans. I said, I totally agree. Because our view is so anthropomorphic.